Accelerating Education, a podcast for everyone involved in educating today's kids, especially those who are interested in optimizing educational outcomes. Here's our host, Richard Capone.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Today, we have with us Phyllis Wolfram, Executive Director of the Council of Administrators of Special Education. Phyllis, welcome.
Thank you, Richard. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm very excited to be able to talk with you today and share some information about what's happening in special education in our nation.
All right. So first of all, before we start, can you just tell us a little bit about CASE and its mission and maybe your role?
So my role is as Executive Director. I am a former special education administrator. I have been in the business about 40 years now. I retired from public education after 35 years of service, and now am working as, again, the Executive Director for CASE, representing those leaders in special education across the nation. We have around 6,000 members. We want to increase that because our mission is to have a collective voice in special education for all of our leaders. Our mission is to advance the field of special education through professional learning, policy, and advocacy, putting our members first and foremost and their needs. It's an exciting time right now to be a part of special education and education in general, right?
Yeah, exciting. That's a little bit of a loaded word, of course. But just to sort of back up what you're saying, I love CASE. And, every time I talk to someone, I say, oh, are you a member of CASE? If they're a SPED director, I'm like, if you're not, it's like you have to be, right? Because it is the largest organization of your peers. And so it makes a lot of sense. And the irony is that, or not irony, the fact of life is we don't know what we don't know, right? And so when you're new in a role, why relearn the wheel? There's somebody else who's already done it, so you want to learn from them. And I think everyone is so collaborative, which is great.
Yeah. People in the field. Post-COVID, we had a number of people that retired, and we have a lot of new administrators, new special education teachers. So our focus has really been a lot on professional learning and what can we do to increase that knowledge base, because what we know is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, the IDEA, is one of the more complex federal laws on the books, and it takes a lot to understand every aspect of that law.
Absolutely. And the one comment you said about a lot of new administrators is true. In my own interaction, there's a lot of SPED directors who have under 5 years special education experience. And that's sometimes quite amazing, right? Because it's not something, it's complicated. There's a lot of nuance.
Yeah. Visiting our state units, Richard, which is part of my job, and we have over 40 state units that are very active. We are a division of the Council for Exceptional Children, and then those state units we call subdivisions of CASE. And every time I have gone to visit, I've done a Slido poll on my computer saying how many have been 1 to 3 years in your current role as a leader or special ed administrator, and then 3 to 6, and so forth and so on. And the largest number, just like you said, is that 1 to 3 years. And that was a couple of years ago. So we still have so many new leaders in the field.
Right, that's great. Well, thank you so much for that background. So I want to jump into some meaty issues because, as we all know, there's been a lot happening, and it's quite honestly, I feel a lot of anxiety about it. And so I'm sure there's other people who do. So can you tell us a little bit about what is your Phyllis Wolfram's opinion about what's happening right now in our government and what they're trying to do and what's happening?
Well, first, I think we all are feeling that we're being faced with a lot of challenges. Because we know in the current administration, a bill just was proposed in the House to eliminate the Department of Education. So that makes people nervous. There have been some executive orders to freeze funding. There was an executive order to eliminate eliminate contracts for the the Institute of Science, the Education Institute of Science, just recently. And that's a lot of money, of people's livelihoods, of contracts that are funding the work that they're doing. So there is a lot of challenges, a lot of anxiety in the field now about, for a number of people. A number of people at the Department of Education have been sent home with pay. We don't know how those positions will be considered in the future. Just this morning, I listened to 2 hours of the confirmation hearing for the Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon, and with full control of the Senate by the current Republican Party, it looks like she'll be confirmed as our new Secretary of Education. She was very composed, and her answers today said she would be, if confirmed or when confirmed, that she would be following up on a lot of questions that were asked by both sides of the aisle, the senators who came in and asked questions. So I'm always hopeful that we can have that collaboration, that we can work with the Secretary of Education. What we also know about some of the executive orders is there is, I'm not an attorney, I'm not a lawyer, but I will say, as you read and you listen to some of the experts, they talk about, are all of the executive orders legal? Some might not be in compliance with current law. So that's something that we have to take a look at. We have to decide if, in fact, what is being put out by the current administration as an executive order is legal. For example, it would be illegal for an executive order to dismantle or eliminate the Office of Special Education Programs, because that particular program is established through federal law. So an executive order cannot override law. And the nominee, Mrs. McMahon, this afternoon, who was interviewed, said that very same thing. She said, we will comply with the law. So what we know, what we believe part of the plan is to move the Office of Special Education under Health and Human Services. And that's where it was when it first started. Now, we don't have experts in education over there, but hopefully those who remain in the Office of Special Education would be those experts, unless they're dismantled, unless they're sent home. So that's where the scary part comes in, because we have federal law and we need consistency with federal law across the United States. We need that consistency for our families and for the students that we serve, because we know people are mobile. Many families, they get transferred because of their jobs. They move from state to state because they might be in the military. So we need consistency for our students with disabilities in how those programs are implemented. And the Office of Special Education has assisted in guidance and regulatory requirements to help us with that consistency from state to state. I could probably go on and on forever. I have probably now created a whole lot of more questions for you to ask me.
So let me ask a few questions that might put me at ease and maybe some other people. So, of course, on a positive level, I know we have you attending to this broader issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're fighting the national fight. We also have CEC, and we've got a lot of smart people there. That makes me feel, honestly, it makes me rest easy at night. The next thing, though, isn't it true that a lot of this can't just be done like changes with a simple majority in the Senate? Some of it has to be 2/3, right? So there is some further threshold that has to be met, right? With a lot of these other programs we have.
So, we have thrown around that term. It takes an act of Congress to make a change. And in this particular instance, with the Department of Education, it would take an act of Congress to eliminate the Department of Education. Now, that would require 60 votes and would require some collaboration with both sides of the aisle, right? because it would take some Democratic votes to make that happen. So what we know is that whether they eliminate the department or they just dismantle it, and a word I heard today used by one of the senators, just gut it. I guess that is a possibility. We'll have to, I think that's one of the challenges and one of the things that we are continuing to pay attention to um, and take a look at. We have, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, one thing that makes me feel better, I know from CELS, the Special Education Legislative Summit, right, where we go out and we lobby all of
Mhm,
our assembly people and the senators and House of
mhm,
Representatives. I know a lot of the people, there are Republicans who support education, and there are Republicans who have children with disabilities, right? I
mhm.
think one thing, there's a lot of rhetoric, about, oh, we need to do this and that. But in the end of the day, isn't it true that education touches more people and there is more collaboration across the aisle than we realize? I mean, and I would sort of hope that it's these people who are the boots on the ground who have to vote who would actually preserve the what we have. I mean, what's your opinion on that?
Um, it seems that this current Republican Party really votes the party line. And so I think that's the challenge that faces us if we're looking to preserve those aspects of the Department of Education. Like I said, it's kind of two separate things with special education and then the overall department, because special education would be preserved as far as an office. Now, how that office is staffed then becomes the responsibility of the Secretary of Education. So a lot could happen. One of the major aspects of watching that is looking at funding. So funding comes through appropriations, right? And so we know that every year we lobby for full funding of IDEA. Um, we educate. That's when we go up on Capitol Hill. We're educating. We're providing information, saying, this funding assists us in meeting the federal requirement. So with that federal requirement comes, in my opinion, a federal mandate to fund that, and it has not happened at this point. Um, Maybe with the new Secretary of Education coming in, we can say we could do more if funding were given to us. We know we fight every year for salaries for educators across the nation to increase, and that's not up to where it needs to be. Um, so, one of my thoughts today when I was listening to the potential or the prospective secretary was, why do you have to eliminate the Department of Education to make it better? Why can't you come in? You have these skills of fixing large corporations or growing a large corporation. Come in and fix the current department. Don't dismantle it. One of the things about sending everything down to the states will make it 50 different ways of providing education. Where is the accountability as a nation to educate our students, not just our students with disabilities, but all students in our nation? So there's a number of things to really think about. A number of questions, came up today, and it's not just K-12 education that is at stake here, but higher ed. And higher ed is where we train our teachers, train our administrators, and we need those programs too. So I think we're faced with a number of challenges moving forward. How can we be collaborative, and how can we assist the secretary in taking a look at every aspect of education? We are if she's appointed, which we are nominated, the nomination goes through, which we believe it will. Our next step will be asking, please meet with us as an organization so that we can share some of our challenges and some of our suggestions for improving the education for our students with disabilities. We have experts in the field that are out there every day doing great work. So those would be some of our next steps.
That's great. What can the individual people listening to this interview do? Like, what can we do? What can our employees, what can teachers do? What can our families do?
Mhm. Well, one thing you can do is go on the Case Action Center. casecec.org, and you'll see the Action Center under our policy tab. And we're asking people to write to their members of the House of Representatives, to write to their senators and say, uh, don't cut Medicaid. Medicaid is the fourth largest funding aspect of public schools, and there is a bill to um, cut Medicaid coming out of the House at $2.3 trillion, which would negatively impact so many families and students and even adults with disabilities, and cut funds coming to public schools. So that's one thing. Write that letter, make that phone call to your congressman's office. One on Medicaid, one on supporting, federal oversight for special education. That we believe that there is a federal role in special education, as it is a federal law, as far as providing guidance and direction and interpreting the law and writing regulations to implement that law. So we have those two on our Action Center. We know that CEC has on their Action Center, and that's exceptionalchildren.org, a call to action around the Education Institute of Science, so that we are not eliminating those contracts. We know that some courts have put a hold on at least the funding freeze, and we're hoping something happens around all of the contracts that were dismantled of late. So those are some things people can do. And if you don't go to our Action Center, pick up the phone and call the office of your representative and tell them what you think. Pick up the phone and call your senator's office and tell them what you think. It's important that your voice is heard. If I heard one time, I heard many times this morning in the confirmation hearings, is each of the senators said, my constituents, I've talked to people in my state. Members of my state have been calling my office. So they are listening. They pay attention to what their voters, what they need, what they think. So that's important that they take action.
All right, that sounds like a great idea. And we know from the research that every phone call, every email counts so much, because it's a statistics game. When they get 1,000 people asking for something, they know, oh, okay, this represents a certain proportion of my population. So, all right, we'll definitely do that. So I have another question, and I'm sorry, she escapes my name, my memory, sorry. The Deputy Secretary of Education, who was also,
I think Penny Schwinn.
Yes, right. So isn't that a sort of a glimmer of hope? Because I remember reading the background on her, and she, I think she became a teacher from Teach for America.
Yes.
And she's got a real hardcore, in my opinion, teaching background, potentially supportive to the cause. Do you have any opinion on her?
I don't know her personally, but I have read. And so when you know that someone has been in those positions and they have seen how schools operate, they see areas where we could improve on whether that's operational or financial aspects to education, accountability, the data pieces. We know that we need data, and how are the states going to be accountable for data, and to whom will they be accountable for? How do we look at education in our nation if we're not reporting that consistently from state to state to the federal government? How are they going to know what education looks like in our nation if we don't have a Department of Education to report to? She will have that depth of knowledge to say, here's how it's been done. Here's how we might be able to fix it. So with the new secretary coming in, relying on those individuals that are new appointments, that have been in the field of education for some point in time. Our hope is that she will lean on the Penny Schwinns that have been yeah, right?
Exactly. And I've sort of realized that too. I realized that the deputy superintendents in larger school districts are the people who roll up their sleeves and get stuff done. So on one level, of course, we know the Secretary of Education comes from a wrestling background. And so I'm hopeful that she will rely on her deputy to actually implement policy and operationalize some things, So
Yeah, I think I would agree with you. And I think the new secretary is going to have her hands full talking with every senator and connecting because she committed to a lot of follow up with each of them this morning. So she's going to need her staff operationalizing aspects of decisions that are made and how can it work effectively and how do we work through some of the challenges that we're going to be faced with. And I think for us to try and remain very positive about what we're faced with. Putting our head in the sand, consistently complaining is not going to help us make any progress. So we're going to have to be collaborative, put our best foot forward, and really try and continue to impact change for our kiddos, for our families, for our students with disabilities. They need to be front and center of our thinking as we're moving forward here.
Right, great. Well, thank you so much. I think I feel a little less anxiety knowing that Phyllis, that you're on it and your team and CEC as well. And
Mhm.
so thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for fighting the fight.
Yeah. And thanks for putting that additional pressure on me, Richard. So I appreciate that you're counting on me. No,
Hey,
I,
it's not just me. If it's me, there's probably 10,000 other people
yeah.
who are going to eventually hopefully watch this and feel a little less
Yeah.
anxiety. So we really appreciate it.
Well, we've got a great team of educators in this nation who are very knowledgeable, and we rely on our members to give us guidance and direction. So it takes a village, and it's going to take all of us working together. So thank you for the opportunity to share today. I so appreciate it.
You're welcome. Take care. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Accelerating Education is sponsored by Let's Go Learn, maker of K-12 precision diagnostic assessment and instruction software. Thanks for listening, and be sure to check out our next episode of Accelerating Education.